So I do know that you are a researcher for the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and you worked with a team to help discover the element tennessine or element 117. And so all that being awesome, amazing things, please describe a little bit of your background, a little bit of your early childhood, or just anything about yourself.
Okay, well, I was actually born in Minneapolis, but I grew up in Nashville. And my sisters and I, there was four of us all together. We were raised in the Edge Hill Projects in Nashville, Tennessee. And my mother, kept us very busy, but I love to read and I love to do little homemade science experiments of my own. And that, my mom kind of recognized that I really love science and got me a microscope and had me involved in a lot of things that kind of nurtured the kind of, the adventurous and curious nature that I normally have and still have. And so I found my love for science, and it was nurtured by some great teachers. I went on to get my bachelor's degree from Tennessee State University in chemistry, and afterwards I joined the Navy in their nuclear power program. And that's kind of where I got my start in nuclear, which was actually about 20 years ago. I started back in the Navy in 2004. So it's been 20 years. But anyway, so that's where I got my start in nuclear. And after the Navy, I came to work at the lab after I had a little job in between there, but I came to work at the lab as a technician. And so I started out kind of, the technicians actually are our support for a lot of the research that we do. And so, technicians are very important, but I started as a technician. I kind of worked my way up to being like a principal investigator slash researcher. So I've been on a lot of really cool projects. The element discovery was one of them. Also, stuff for NASA with plutonium 238, and working with other national labs and on other projects for various government agencies. So it's been a really interesting and really cool and rewarding career. So
That sounds
that's
awesome.
me in a nutshell.
That sounds awesome, truly. I don't know how you got all of that so quickly, but I did hear you mention that your mom kind of nurtured your curiosity at a young age. And sometimes for young people, that curiosity may not come out as early sometimes. So, how do you say we can go about, and I guess the older generation, how do you see people can go about engaging a wider audience that like understands the importance of STEM and like can understand to value it, especially for the youth of today? How can we get them to see the importance of it? Because you just began at a
Mhm.
young age growing to become curious, but for those of people that maybe don't really see that, maybe don't value that, how can we go about supporting them?
Well, you have to meet people where they are. You can't make somebody like STEM, but you can have fun doing something like an activity and tie STEM into it. So like feeding them STEM tidbits until they bite, and you're putting these little STEM baits out there. And then when they bite, then like, oh, we have this program or however. But what I find is helpful and useful whenever I do outreach or I try to engage students in STEM and interest in STEM is that I talk about it in such a fun way. Most of the time, students, especially girls around like fifth grade, they just lose an interest in STEM because it's taught so just gray. If there's no vibrancy, I'm not saying teachers are not doing a great job at it, but their interest in it, it's not reaching them. And so meeting people and meeting students where they are is probably the best approach. You know, having girls learn how to make lip gloss, and so girls love lip gloss, and they like I want to make my own nail polish, or and not just saying girls only like nail polish. I mean, people want their lips moisturized and maybe their nails to look nice. And so just in making sure that we include everyone and making it accessible to everyone, something that is they don't see science as some sort of abstract uh thing out there, making it applicable. Because a lot of times you'll learn some concepts in science, you're like, okay, what does this have to do with anything? But if you bring in the application of what you're learning, I think it'll make sense. And so then learning about it, it just becomes a lot easier because it just makes sense and you know why you're learning it. So
I
that's what I
can
think.
I can definitely relate to that. I know when I was in about fourth grade, that's when I decided I hate science. I'm not gonna go into science because the way that it was being taught to me, it was just like it seemed to me like that was all there really was to science, and I was like, this is just not for me. So at like 9 years old, I was like, this, science is just not my thing. I'll just stick to math and reading, and so I completely understand where you're coming from, but also understanding that we can't just say here's a STEM or a science subject like it. It happens more gradual. So I appreciate that. Leading into my next question, why is it important that STEM education can be accessible to all students?
I think it's important that it's accessible because when you find yourself um, the only person in a certain demographic that is represented in rooms where you occupy in STEM, you realize that this is because taking it all the way back to those younger students like fourth, fifth grade, even down to kindergarten, they first of all didn't have a love for STEM, and then there were not any resources available to them to kind of change their mind if they decided they didn't like it. And so I think having accessibility to STEM is important because you miss out on individuals who would have been great in science, technology, engineering, or math. And so because of that, as you get older and you get more involved in whatever field that you're in, you may or may not see people that look like you because you come from the demographic that is overlooked and resources are not as readily available in I mean, I grew up in the projects. I mean, there were not a lot of STEM programs in the early 80s for black girls or for black boys or for historically underrepresented minorities. So it's it's kind of meeting and answering a need that we have known was there for a long time. There are groups out there, there are outreach groups, but who are they catering to? And I'm thinking about like at the time, they were not catering to my demographic. And so, STEM camps and going to NASA and all these things, that wasn't something that I knew about, but, other people did. And so, as I, went about in my career, I always found myself by myself, either the only woman or the only Black person or a combination of both in some kind of setting. And so I think reaching back and ensuring that those opportunities are available and accessible to young people is important so that they don't have to find themselves the only in whatever room they decide to be in.
Absolutely. I heard you mention outreach, so I know you are involved in some outreach yourself, obviously. Why do you think that it's important that we target the youth specifically when it comes to STEM, other than the obvious reason being that, you know, they're going to be our future change makers in the world? Why is it important that we target the youth now?
Because you have an opportunity to imprint and impact them before something else does that. I mean, youth are, I know young people don't like to hear it, but they are impressionable. They take a lot of cues from social aspects. There are a lot of external things that impact the choices that they make. Ultimately it is their choice on what they decide to do, but um playing a role in some of that external exposure, I think helps early on because you decide whether or not you like something, you're going to go with something that you like to do. Even like, little kids, 5-year-olds, they don't like pickles, they're not going to eat pickles. They don't like a certain type of food, they're not going to do it. If they don't like riding a bike, they're not going to do it. So it's just being able to, like I said, meet them where they are, and provide an alternative that is fun, and then slowly kind of plug in, this is science, so it's kind of like they're doing it, and they don't know, but by the time they figure it out, they like it. And so then they're more likely to pursue it later on, as something that they associate with a positive experience. So getting them young, I think is awesome. Um, but it's never too late to love science. So.
Well, with my initiative, I like to say a lot that I'm not necessarily saying that young people all need to go and pursue a science or engineering or math
Mhm.
career, but I want students to understand that STEM education can actually help you in other realms and other areas. So, what can we all gain from exploring STEM, and how can it act as kind of a catalyst for future success, whether we want to go into like cosmetology or we want to go into acting, like just wherever we find ourselves.
Right, that's a good question. I mean, personally, I'm gonna admit that I'm biased. I think science is evident in anything that you're in. Just like knowing how to talk, knowing how to speak, knowing how to read. You have to have those kind of basic skills to do anything. Um, a lot of times people don't realize the science that is involved in some of the other disciplines, but I think having, I guess, the knowledge that science is going to exist whether you do it or not. Science is going to exist whether you believe it or not. Um, and some of the principles behind some of the science that we do um, are changeable. Opinions, and not only opinions, but some of the principles actually can change. And so knowing that change is actually the constant and not what you're experiencing or learning at the time, being able to adapt to the changes, because one thing about science is that we love to prove each other wrong.
Mhm.
Scientists love to kind of, okay, you have this theory, I'm going to go test it out. Oh, well, I'm going to go test this out. And you're trying to, I know it's kind of weird, but we do try to prove each other wrong. And so knowing that you're always able to challenge yourself. So, kind of taking that, science is not just a challenge, but it is encouraging challenge, accepting that, change is constant, and questioning, having that questioning, attitude about things like, even if you do go into acting or cosmetology, the why is always a good thing to know. And that's what scientists, that we spend our whole lives, the why and how. And so I think those things can be applied to anything.
I definitely agree. I know, especially just looking at the scientific method, it challenges students to like ask those questions and then inquire on their own. So they're developing these skills regardless of whether they want to pursue that or not. So it's really important that they engage in that. I think that about wraps it up for all the questions. It went by really quickly, but my actual last and final question is, who is your favorite scientist besides yourself and why?
Oh, girl. I admire Dr. Mae Jemison. I mean, ever since I was a little, I say little girl, I was about 12 when I learned about who she was. She was the very first Black woman astronaut, and I had a poster of her in my room when I was little. Normally girls have posters of whatever favorite boy band or actor or crush or whatever. Well, mine was Mae Jemison, because I just thought she was just so cool in her official NASA astronaut suit. And I thought I wanted to be an astronaut at one point in time. uh Being able to just kind of be amongst the heavens, she was able to do that. And she was able to stand out, not only because she was intelligent, but because of, who she was. And so I really admire her for that. I also have a favorite male scientist, which is
Do
Neil deGrasse
tell.
Tyson.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I absolutely, I've watched So I've watched a lot of videos of him like kind of analyzing um theories and things like that. And I just love how his analytical nature is just so astute to and he talks in a way that even the most kind of inexperienced scientist or inexperienced person not familiar with any kind of scientific terms can understand what he's saying. And I think that, some of them, obviously, I don't agree with everything, that is out there, but I like to listen to his take on things just to kind of get that perspective from like a astrophysicist. I mean,
Mhm.
that's kind of a cool perspective, I think, on anything.
Yes. He's very, very brilliant. I remember when my mom first introduced me to him, and I was like, whoa.
No.
I know, I was like, whoa. But I definitely agree. Well, that was the actual last question. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to
Yeah.
do this.